Welcome to God and Country Biblical Exposition. The topic I would like to discuss for this week's program is whether Vice President Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th in certifying the Electoral College count. And of course, there is even a constitutional debate over whether the Vice President's role is to certify the electors or simply just report the results. The Constitution simply states that the President of the Senate, who would be the Vice President of the United States, shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the vote shall then be counted. The question asked at the recent Republican primary debate was, did Mike Pence do the right thing on January 6th? Here is the question from the moderators. So President Trump's former vice president is on the stage tonight. He has faced hecklers on the campaign trail over his actions on January the 6th. On that day, the vice president moved forward with the certification of the election. Do you believe that Mike Pence did the right thing? Senator Scott, do you believe that he did the right thing? And Tim Scott answered, absolutely, he did the right thing. Asa Hutchinson said Donald Trump is morally disqualified from being president again as a result of what happened on January the 6th. Chris Christie said, Mike Pence stood for the Constitution. He deserves our thanks as Americans for putting his oath of office and the Constitution of the United States before personal, political, and unfair pressure. Nikki Haley said, I think that Vice President Pence did the right thing, and I do think we need to give him credit for that. Doug Burgum said, happy to answer the question. Mike Pence did the right thing. And Ron DeSantis, he had first avoided the question and then started to talk about how this upcoming election is not about January 6th, 2021, but about January 20th, 2025. But then being pressed, DeSantis said, Mike did his duty. I have no beef with him. But during the exchange, Mike Pence said the following. I think the American people deserve to know whether everyone on this stage agrees that I kept my oath to the Constitution that day. There's no more important duty, so answer the question. I put my left hand on Ronald Reagan's Bible. I raised my right hand and took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and ended it with a prayer, so help me God. It was a promise that I made to the American people, but I also made it to my Heavenly Father. Every day for 4 years, I sought to keep that oath, and everyone on the stage needs to make it clear whether or not they will do the same if they earn this job in the confidence of the American people. The American people deserve to know that the President asked me in his request that I reject or return votes unilaterally. Power that no vice president in American history has ever exercised or taken. He asked me to put him above the Constitution. And I chose the Constitution, and always will. I had no right. Unquote. And to quote an article in National Review, Mike Pence has made his courage in standing up to Trump's pressure an important theme in his campaign. But to this I would ask, was this courage on the part of Mike Pence in defending the Constitution, or was this a lack of courage in being unwilling to pursue the possibility of serious fraud in the election? It all depends upon one's perspective. Like is often said, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Also, one man's courage is another man's cowardice. People can have courage, but is it righteous courage? I mean, Hitler and Stalin could be said to have had courage. The signers of the Declaration of Independence are said to have courage. They wrote, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. They were risking their lives. They were courageous, but the British called it treason. They called it breaking the law of the land. And here's another question. Did President Trump actually say to Mike Pence, I want you to put me over the Constitution? Well, there's no evidence of that. This is obviously Pence's interpretation of what President Trump was asking him to do. And here's another question. Was Mike Pence defending the Constitution, or was this his interpretation of the Constitution? Does the Constitution even address this issue? Does it give or not give the Vice President the right to refuse the certification of the electors? The Democrats and the Democrat media would have us believe that this legal question is settled. Well, the question isn't so simple. Congress, not the Vice President, ultimately decides whether to accept the votes from any particular state. But the Vice President can play a role, or at least have a voice, in objecting to the certification, just like any other member of Congress or any member of the Senate can also object. And that's my concern with Mike Pence's actions, and the concern of those in the Republican Party that believe there was substantial fraud in the election. I mean, legally, there's no question that Mike Pence had to ultimately accept the decision of Congress. Even Trump would agree with that. But there's a whole lot more Pence could have done and said in protest. Well, here's the actual law. The 12th Amendment of the Constitution outlines how the president is to be elected. The states shall designate electors to represent how their states voted in the election. These electors shall then send their votes to the federal government. The president of the Senate, who would be the Vice President of the United States, shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all of the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president. So there's no mention there of the vice president having any role in deciding the validity of the electors. However, in 1876, in the race between the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and the Democrat Samuel Tilden, 4 states sent conflicting electors due to fraud in the election in those states. Some supported Hayes, others supported Tilden. This was in Oregon, South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. The Republicans argued that it was the decision of the vice president to decide whether or not to accept certain electors. The Democrats said no, this was the responsibility of Congress. A compromise was reached, and a congressional committee was created to decide which electors to accept. And because of this controversy, 10 years later, so this would never happen again, Congress passed the Elector Count Act of 1887. The act reserved to the states, quote, the final determination of any controversy or contest concerning the appointment of all or any of the electors. The only way for there to be objections to the validity of the electors and their votes is if one senator and one congressman put into writing their objections. Then the issue was to be debated in both houses for no more than 2 hours. Then Congress was to vote on whether or not to accept the electors and their certification. And this is what actually happened on January the 6th of 2021. 2 Republicans, one from the Senate, one from the House, objected, and it went for a vote in both the Senate and the House. 139 Republicans in the House and 8 Republicans in the Senate voted not to accept the electors because of fraud in certain states. And of course, 147 was not enough to stop the certification. Here's an article from the New York Times. The 147 Republicans who voted to overturn the election, and the New York Times posted the picture of each of these legislators. Now, of course, none of the Democrats were going to oppose the election because their man won. Now, I could not find in any of these laws, the 12th Amendment of the Constitution or the Elector Count Act of 1887, any direct reference to the role of the vice president in determining the validity of the electors. Some lawyers say it's there. I don't see it. But a year later, after January 6, 2021, the Democrats put into an omnibus appropriations bill the Election Count Reform Act of 2022, which clarified the role of the vice president in the whole matter. Now, while the Republican debate was going on, Tucker Carlson was interviewing Donald Trump. And President Trump contended that if the original law from 1887 said that the vice president could have nothing to do with objecting to the electors, why would the Democrats want to reform the 1887 bill? And Trump makes a good point. Why would the Democrats want to change the law if it was clear that the vice president had no role? So here's my take. But before I say another word, at this point, I'm going to end my YouTube program and direct you over to my Rumble channel for the rest of the program. Just go to rumble.com, type in God and Country Biblical Exposition, and this is program 272. Now, even there on Rumble, I'm not going to say that Trump won the election or claim some crazy conspiracy theory. But the way it has been with YouTube is that even if I mention the results of the election or refer to some documented, validated report of fraud, my YouTube gets taken down, and it's a real hassle to contest the strike and get the YouTube put back up. So why even bother? And I've noticed that quite a few conservative commentators are now doing this, posting only a portion of their commentary on YouTube and then directing their listeners to hear the rest of the commentary on free speech platforms. So over to Rumble I go.